Yo, welcome back to another video, man. We is almost through June, y'all, and I have to say June went by pretty quick. So I just hope that everybody out there is safe. Everybody out there is achieving their goals and trying every day, even though that it's difficult. You know, I jump right to things too, y'all. Like, I hope y'all out there trying to better yourself as an individual person, which is very, easier to say than do. But with God in us and with Christ in us, ain't nothing that can't be done. But let's get back into it, man. We was on where Judas betrays Jesus, right? So let me go ahead and get into it. We almost done with this too, y'all. We finna hit Acts. And it's a lot of stuff to read. Well, Romans, 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians. I love Ephesians. Galatians. So we got a lot to get into, and then I'm gonna go back to the beginning. But when Jesus had spoken these words, he went away with his disciples across the ravine of the Kidron, where there was a garden which he entered with his disciples. Now Judas, who was betraying him, also knew the place, so he knew the law, right? Because Jesus had often met there with his disciples. So Judas, having obtained the Roman cohort and officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, came there with torches. I could not say that. Torches and weapons. So they came with that iron, all right? Jesus, therefore, knowing all these things, so he knew they was coming up on him, came out into the open and said to them, "Whom are you seeking?" Jesus stepped out there. "Who y'all looking for?" They answered him, "Jesus Nazareth." He said to them, "I am he." Uh-oh. And Judas also, who was betraying him, was standing with them. You gotta watch who you call your brother. You gotta watch who you call your friends, man. They will betray you, man. They drew back and fell to the ground. He then asked them again, "Whom are you seeking?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus answered, "I told you that I am he. So if you're seeking me, let these men go on their way." This took place so that the word which he spoke would be fulfilled. "Of those whom you have given me, I lost not one." Then Simon Peter, since he had a sword, drew it. So Simon struck the high priest's slave and cut his right ear off. And the slave name was Malchus. So Jesus said to Peter, "Put the sword into the sheath. The cup with which the Father has given me, and am I not to drink it?" So you know that he got betrayed, man. Peter up, sword, sliced his ear off, Go to show you that, they weren't just little punks, you know what I mean? For you to cut some dude ear off, man, you gotta have a lot of heart, for you to, there's some people that can't even throw a punch, bro, but for you to cut his ear off, like that's something, that's something, bro. Your ear getting chopped off. Boy, so, okay, they coming to get him though, right? So, the commander and the officers of the Jews arrested Jesus and bound him and brought him to Annas first. For he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, I hope that's how you say it, who was the high priest that year. Now, we're just going to say C for Caiaphas, okay? So C was the one who had advised the Jews that it was in their best interest for one man to die in behalf of the people. Simon Peter was following Jesus, and so was another disciple. Now that disciple was known to the high priest, and he entered with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest. But Peter was standing at the doors outside. So the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, went out and spoke to the doorkeeper and brought Peter in. Then the slave woman who was the doorkeeper said to Peter, "You are not also one of this man's disciples, are you?" He said, "I am not," so he lied. Now the slaves and the officers were standing there and had made a charcoal fire, for it was cold, and they were warming themselves. And Peter was also with them, so he with the ops right now, standing and warming himself. But I think Peter was in there trying to peep the scenery. You know what I mean? Like Peter wasn't in there on no, man, I'm with them now. He was just, I think he was trying to peep the scenery, right? The high priest, but Jesus said, yeah, we're going to see. The high priest then questioned Jesus about his disciples and about his teachings. Jesus answered them, I have spoken openly to the world. I always taught in synagogues and in the temple area where all the Jews congregate. And I said nothing in secret. Why are you asking me? Ask those who have heard what I spoke to them. Look, these people know what I said. But when he said this, one of the officers who was standing nearby struck Jesus. So he bust Jesus, saying, is that the way you answer the high priest? Jesus answered him, if I have spoken wrongly, testify of the wrong. But if I rightly, why do you strike me? So Annas set him bound to see the high priest. So Peter denial of Jesus. Now Simon, Now Simon Peter was still standing and warming himself. So they said to him, you are not one of his disciples, are you? He denied it. I am not. One of the slaves of the high priest who related to the one who ear Peter cut off said, did I not see you in the garden with him? Peter then denied it again, and immediately a rooster crowed. He denied Jesus and not even knowing that he did it 3 times. And I'm not judging Peter at all, but I'm pretty sure there's been times in our life where we denied Jesus, and we gotta try our best to not deny Christ. You know what I mean? We gotta try to give him we gotta give him his flowers, man. You know what I'm saying? And it's hard, but you know, honestly saying it, we need to understand the whole process of what he did for us. He literally lost his life for us to, you know, have mercy, bro. And that's very, 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 like, that's something he didn't probably have to do, bro. And, you know, it's even more crazier because anybody could be saved. And that's the whole objective with this right now. I hope everybody wake up. But then they brought Jesus from sea into the room, and it was early, and they themselves did not enter the room so that they would not be defiled, but might eat the Passover. Therefore, Pilate came out to them and said, what occasion are they bringing against this man? Accusation, excuse me. Are they bringing I said occasion. What accusation? Accusation. I'm sorry, y'all. I can't read. Are they bringing against this man? They answered and said to him, if this man were not a criminal, we would not have handed him over to you. So Pilate said to them, take him yourself and judge him. According to your law, the Jews said to him, we are not permitted to put anyone to death. This happened so that the word of Jesus, which he said, indicating what kind of death he was going to die, would be fulfilled. Therefore, Pilate entered the room again and summoned Jesus and said to him, you are the king of the Jews. Jesus answered, are you saying this on your own, or did others tell you about me? Pilate answered, I am not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and the chief priests handed you over to me. What have you done? Jesus answered, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would be fighting so that I would not be handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not of this realm. Therefore, Pilate said to him, so you are a king? Jesus answered, you say correctly that I am a king. For this purpose I have been born, and for this I have come into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth, listen to my voice. Pilate said to him, what is truth? And after saying this, he came out again to the Jews and said to them, I find no grounds at all for charges in his case. So they're just going to get him out of there. However, you have a custom that I release one prisoner for you at the Passover. Therefore, do you wish that I release for you the king of the Jews? So they shouted again, saying, not this man, but Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a rebel. Ooh, I want to keep going. We want to get into You know what? I'm gonna read one more. The crown of the thorns. So Pilate then took Jesus and had him flogged, and the soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and placed it on his head, and put a purple cloak on him. And they repeatedly came up to him and said, "Hail, King of the Jews," and slapped him in the face again and again. And then Pilate came out again and said to them, "See, I am bringing him out to you, so that you will know that I find no grounds at all for charges in this case." Jesus then came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. And Pilate said to them, "Behold the man." So when the chief priests and the officers saw him, they shouted, saying, "Crucify, crucify." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourself and crucify him, for I find no grounds for charges in his case." So he basically, like, I wonder if he, like, say, "I ain't want nothing to do with it." I have to ask. I think I'm reading that right. The Jews answered him, "We have a law, and by that law he ought to die, because he made himself out to be the Son of God." Therefore, when Pilate heard this statement, he was even more afraid, and he entered the room again and said to Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus gave him no answer. So Pilate said to him, "Are you not speaking to me? Do you know what I have authority to release you? And I have authority to crucify you." Jesus answered him, "You will have no authority over me at all, if it had not been given to you from above. For this reason, the one who handed me over to you has the greater sin." As a result of this, Pilate made efforts to release him. So he wanted to get him out of there. But the Jews shouted, saying, "If you release this man, you are not a friend of Caesar. Everyone who makes himself out to be a king opposes Caesar." So I wonder if Jesus had a little mercy on Pilate, since he wanted to let him go, Therefore, when Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judgment seat at a place called the Pavement, but in Hebrew, Gabbatha. Now it was the day of preparation for the Passover. It was about the 6th hour. And he said to the Jews, "Look, your king." So they shouted away with him, "Crucify him." Pilate said to them, "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priests answered, "We have no king except Caesar." So he then handed him over to them to be crucified. Then they took Jesus, therefore, and he went out carrying his own cross to the place called the place of a skull, which in Hebrew is called Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with him 2 other men, one on either side, and Jesus in between. Now Pilate also wrote an inscription and put it on the cross. It was written, "Jesus the Nazareth, the King of the Jews." Therefore, many of the Jews read this inscription because the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and it was written in Hebrew, Latin, and Greek. So the chief priests of the Jews were saying to Pilate, "Do not write the King of the Jews. Rather write that he said, 'I am the King of the Jews.'" Pilate answered, What I have written, I have written." Then the soldiers, when they had crucified Jesus, took his outer garments and made 4 parts, a part to each soldier, and the tunic also. But the tunic was seamless, woven in one piece. So they said to one another, "Let's not tear it, but cast lots for it to decide whose it should be." This happened so that the scripture would be fulfilled. "They divided my garments among themselves, and they cast lots for my clothing." Therefore the soldiers did these things. Now beside the cross of Jesus stood his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. So when Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her into his own household. After this, Jesus, knowing that all things had already been accomplished in order that the scripture would be fulfilled, said, "I am thirsty." A jar full of sour wine was standing there. So they put a sponge full of sour wine on a branch of hyssop and brought it up to his mouth. Therefore, when Jesus had received the sour wine, he said, "It is finished." And he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. Now then, since it was the day of preparation to prevent the bodies from remaining on the cross on the Sabbath, For the Sabbath was a high day. The Jews requested of a Pilate that their legs be broken, and the bodies be taken away. So the soldiers came and broke the legs of the first man and of the other who was crucified with him. But after they came to Jesus, when they saw that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. They didn't break his legs. Yet one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and immediately blood and water came out. And he who has seen has testified, and his testimony is true. And he knows that he is telling the truth, so that you also may believe. For these things took place so that the scripture would be fulfilled. Not a bone of him should be broken. And again, another scripture said, they will look at him who they pierced. Now, after these things, Joseph of Arimathea, being a disciple of Jesus, but a secret one for fear of the Jews, requested of Pilate that he might take away the body of Jesus. And Pilate granted permission. So he came and took away his body. Nicodemus, who had first come to him by night, also came, bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 100 liters weight. So they took the body of Jesus and bound it in linen wrappings with the spices at his burial, custom of the Jews. Now in the place where he was crucified there was a garden, and in the garden was a new tomb in which no one had yet been laid. Therefore, because of the Jewish day of preparation, since the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there. So that's where we at. Can't wait to hit it tomorrow when it continue. But we're gonna get into it tomorrow, man. Y'all be cool, man. Y'all try to do something productive. Keep your heads up. Keep fighting. Stay strong-minded. Keep pushing, man. Most of all, stay prayed up. Love one another. I thank God, man. I just felt the presence of the Lord literally enter my house, entered my room. And it's time for me to worship him. So y'all make sure y'all do more of that. And y'all be cool. I love y'all. Appreciate it. Motivating the trenches. Let's change together, baby.